So the 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre is quite possibly the most revered horror movie of all time. If you haven't seen it, you at least know about it, and you at least know its iconic killer Leatherface. This movie has had such a wide cultural impact, it's actually shocking. It's not only a cult classic movie, but it's one of the most beloved horror movies of all time, and I recently watched it for the first time, and I can say that it still holds up shockingly well. And I think the reason why this holds up so well after 45 almost years is because there's a timelessness to it. The characters they're not dressed overtly 70s. The movie is set in the 70s, and you can tell it is, but there is this timeless quality where going to somebody's house and them being serial killers, I think, will always be a fear in modern society and in society to come. So the actual horror of the movie, I think, really does transcend the time period it's set in a great way. And the way it's shot, too, isn't like flashy or visual effects heavy, because it's a pretty low budget movie and you can tell it's low budget, but it actually manages to do a lot with its low budget qualities. The movie is set pretty much in one location, but it really does wring the most out of that location it can. It's shot on just a little film camera. It doesn't look great, but it doesn't look bad either. And the way it's shot is half kind of this guerrilla handheld shooting style where when they're in a car, it's just kind of moving back and forth between characters, snap zooms and whatnot. And then there's some actually really nice shots. There's this great shot of under this swing, and it like pushes all the way up to the house, following this girl up to it, and it's this wonderful looking shot. There's some legitimately good looking shots in this movie, and I was shocked. I was honestly shocked hearing about the budget, seeing the quality of the movie, seeing the quality of some of the actors, which isn't great. I was shocked at how well shot it was. It wasn't all handheld, and it wasn't all super flashy. It really does get the job done in every way it possibly can. But the one thing that is the most interesting and also the least interesting is the characters. And what I mean by that is the heroes, the main characters of the movie, are the most generic cookie-cutter characters who have ever been written of all time. You got victim number 1, who is a man. You got victim number 2, who is his girlfriend. You got victim number 3, who's a guy in a wheelchair. And then victim number 4, who is a girl who gets away at the end, so she's not a victim. But they're just the most generic characters ever. The first 10 minutes is sort of devoted to them on their summer getaway. They're going to some abandoned house, which is weird. I don't know why anybody would ever go to an abandoned house as a summer vacation. I mean, maybe they had a line about it that I missed, but that was very odd. I don't think anyone would ever do that. But anyway, you get this 10 minutes or so of screen time where they're just like chatting, and then they pick up this deranged hitchhiker, and they chat some more, and they go off to this house, and then the killings start. So the first 10 minutes is rough because the characters suck and they're not interesting at all. But the most interesting part of this movie is actually the killers, who have way more character and are way more entertaining than the main characters. You've got the head of the household, who's this crazy guy that owns a gas station, but he's also the most normal. He is just normal enough to put on a face for average people and be kind of normal-ish. And then you've got the deranged hitchhiker, who is just straight up a psychopath. Then you got Leatherface, who's the most iconic, or one of the most iconic horror villains ever, who has been completely butchered throughout the rest of the sequels. He's turned into just a regular old generic bland slasher villain. But in this one, he's like a child almost, which is so interesting. He's like a baby who is just defending himself and happens to be gigantic. And instead of defending himself by just pushing people, he kills them. So the horror in the movie comes out of that, him killing these people, but at the same time, his motivation for killing them is also pretty apparent to me. He is just scared of these new people who are coming into his house, and that's very interesting. This movie also is still legitimately effective even after 40 plus years. And I don't know how it's more effective than most horror movies today. It's shocking to me. And most of the horror takes place off screen too. In fact, the movie was trying to be shot for an under R rating. They didn't want this movie to be rated R. So there's a minimum amount of blood, there is some, and there isn't any cursing, there's no nudity. Sometimes it gets a little close, but there's no nudity, there's no cursing, there's barely there is violence, but there's not a whole lot of it, and yet it is still quite an effective horror movie that is genuinely unsettling and upsetting at times. I mean, you watch the guy get killed by the chainsaw, the handicapped guy, but it's all shot from behind him, so you don't see it, but you kind of see him driving this chainsaw into him, and then you see the girl get hung up on the meat hook, but it kind of cuts away as he's doing it, so you just see the aftermath. And that is the whole movie. You just see the aftermath of the horror. And that honestly makes it so much more effective to me, and reminds me a lot of the Blair Witch Project, because that movie has a lot of of those elements to it, where a lot is vague, a lot is ambiguous, and you don't see a whole lot. But because you don't see a whole lot, your mind is left to kind of wander and fill in the holes of what's happening, and that does make it a little bit more unsettling than just showing some super violent thing and guts spilling everywhere. It is more unsettling to imagine what's happening to these people. But the one big issue I have with this movie is the pacing, and the acting is kind of shoddy here and there, but the pacing is pretty rough, and the main characters aren't that interesting. But what I mean by the pacing is that this movie is sub 90 minutes. It's very short, it's short, sweet, gets to the point, but there is a couple things that I wish were a little bit tightened up, even though it is sub 90 minutes. Like I said, the first 10 minutes with the generic, boring main characters, I just maybe get to the point quicker. I mean, 10 minutes, 15 minutes is short, but in a sub 90 minute movie, it doesn't feel that short. So maybe tighten that up a little bit. And then there's a big extended chase scene in the middle of the movie between the last victim, I think her name is Sally, I don't know, I don't care, and Leatherface. She's running through the woods and he's chasing her, and then she goes into this house and he chases her through there, and she jumps out a window and she goes through the woods again and he's chasing her through the woods again. And it's this like 15-minute sequence where she's just running through various foliage and dead trees. And it became very boring very quickly. It is a good chase sequence for about 5 to 7 minutes. It's pretty effective. There's some great shots in there. Leatherface running with this chainsaw, this huge body behind her, is a frightening image. But after 15 minutes of the same thing on loop, it does get old pretty quick. And then after that, she goes into the gas station, and the head of this household kidnaps her again and brings her right back in, which is an awesome little segue right into the climax of the movie. So I wish that that was trimmed up a bit. I wish that the beginning was trimmed up a bit. But other than that, and the main characters, this movie is awesome. I was legitimately shocked at how much I enjoyed this movie and how unsettling it still is. And I can legitimately say that this deserves to be a cult classic. It deserves to be seen still, even though it is 45 years old. It's shocking that this movie actually affected me more than most horror movies. Like The Conjuring, I have fun with because it is so over the top. But this movie is so grounded and it's so realistic that it does create this sense of dread with just hitchhikers and with this crazy people in their house. That was really nice. I really enjoyed it. So if you haven't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre for some reason, like me, then I would recommend you go check it out. It's currently on Netflix as of recording, so definitely watch it. It's fun. I really enjoyed it. And R.I.P. Tobe Hooper. R.I.P. pretty much everyone in this movie. Anyway, bye-bye.